And can I have a approval of the minutes as listed in our agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. And then moving on to the 2020-2024 Capital Improvement Program.
Mr. Chair,
Ms. Grill.
the committee is still finalizing this, so probably is a good idea to hold that item.
Sure, we'll hold that item without any objection. And then moving on to item 3, the 2020 City of West Allis Mayor's recommended budget. The mayor's remarks.
Mr. Chair.
Mayor, yes.
Good evening, committee members, Mr. Chair. Every year, I pretty much am coming with the same song that every year budgets are getting incredibly challenging. From my first day in this job, I have made every attempt to provide the best services that we can afford, the best we can do with the least amount of money, and that really hasn't wavered. But this year was probably one of the most difficult budgets that I have had to go through, and I cannot thank and commend Rebecca and Peggy and her team enough in the scrutiny and the hard work as we went through this. It was just incredibly appreciated, and they did a very fine job with a very difficult situation. But I do think in the future going forward, we're going to have a serious, sincere discussion on what we are going to continue to provide as far as services. There are some Cadillac services that the city provides that we don't see in other communities, and we really need to take a look at that and determine if we can continue to provide it wholly or if we can continue to provide it in an altered fashion. Just a couple of highlights before we go into the meat of this presentation. We tried to address a couple of things that we've heard frequently to improve how we operate, and I'll just highlight a couple of those. One is just looking at a possible way to reallocate a vacant or a recently vacated position or soon to be vacated position to become some type of business liaison, which would be a one-stop shop for people looking to open a new business. This person would be the go-between between the permitting process and the licensing process and the plan commission and the funding, and just really kind of an epicenter for people that are trying to open businesses in the city of West Allis. Another one to touch on is exploring options on realigning to get some type of a Parks Building and Grounds Commission. Just, we kind of have that gray structure I think you're all aware of, where we've got the rec department programming on our parks, we've got our staff maintaining the parks. It's very, it's like an octopus, and we're just trying to get rid of some tentacles, I guess I would say. Changing the role of the communication strategist to include public engagement and project management, working with the neighborhood association and community services from the police department. And another one is looking at a structural deficit action team to, circling back to what I said earlier about really scrutinizing the services that we do provide, looking at our limitations, looking at available resources, and looking at the financial impacts of everything that we do. And that's written up in the letter. But I think, you know, just in closing, I've said this before, I don't know if it was to this group or not, but over the years, I think that mayors across the state have really done a good job of making changes and continuing to keep services where their cities, residents, and businesses have expected. And you know, maybe that was the intent of the changes made by the former governor, was to really get everybody to think. However you feel about it, it is what it is, and we are where we are. The fact is now shared revenue is not going up, coming back to the cities, the communities in any substantial fashion. As we know, we talked before about the funding structure changes at the county level that are pushing for referendums. Those discussions are happening, but we know how change goes, and we know how fast change takes place. And significant funding changes well, the discussion is finally seems to be finally happening. I still think it's going to be a few years before we're going to see anything substantial, and we would become less reliant on property taxes to fund everything we do. So there's going to be some tough choices ahead, but right now we're looking at operating 2020. So I don't know if anybody at this time has any questions. I'll be here for a few minutes, but I have to duck out to eat something and then have the youth commission meeting at 6:30. So if you think of anything after the fact, just feel free to give me a call or shoot me an email. Thanks for your consideration.
Thank you, Mayor Devine.
Thanks.
And Ms. Grill, I think
Yes.
this is your
Yes.
baby.
Oh.
Well, that's wrong
I'm glad
term.
it's born.
It's
been a long labor.
Yeah. What I mean to say is go ahead. Sorry.
The first couple slides just go over, it's important to remember as we put the budget together what our focus really is. And this is just highlighting the mission and vision statements of the city. You're all familiar with those, so I don't need to read them to you. And then the strategic plan goals, there were 5 goals that we focus on providing the services. And when the council adopted this in 2017, we're about halfway through that. So as we, as the departments work on putting together their requested budget, and as we look at those to prepare the recommended budget, we consider all of those moving forward. The core values, you're familiar with these. They were adopted by the council. This is what our employees live out the values on a day-to-day basis. And then our core competencies that we rate with our performance management program. So digging a little bit into the budget, the mayor had mentioned some of these items, but we just broke down some of the priorities and focuses by each of the strategic plan goals, looking at streamlining our permitting and licensing, working with our Artscape grant program to have murals. The mayor mentioned about the business liaison position, create the development assistant team. I'm not sure if anyone had an opportunity to look at that. I think it's based on Madison, but basically they have a focused time where people can make appointments when they've already submitted their plans and things, so departments can be there as a resource and help them move through the process. The mayor also mentioned about the Park Buildings and Grounds Commission, looking at exploring that, creating that, implement the grant program for Burnham Point. There was a great success this year with an event that went on there. Just want to keep that momentum going. Hopefully we can find some grant funding to do that. And then looking at finding some other funding options so we could do that in different areas that might be need that a little jolt for revitalization. So that is for the number 1 goal of the strategic plan. Does anyone have any questions on that? Alderman May looks like he wants to say something.
The gears are rolling. I'll talk later.
Okay. Then number 2 of the priorities for our strategic plan goal is quality of life. We're looking at putting in more security cameras. We've had some that have been out there several years, so we're in need of replacing them. So we need to have a replacement program and funding for that. I believe it was in 2018 was the first year that we had received funding, or was it 2017?
3 years for the CART grant?
It's 2.
Okay, so we had a grant from Milwaukee County for the CART officer that is expiring at the end of this year. So the recommended budget does include funding that position. Looking also at school resource officer, part-time one at Lane Intermediate School, working through with the school district on that. That's something that if it would come to fruition, it's hopeful that they would be funding that position. Looking at installing fleet and interview cameras for the police department, that's contingent on capital funding. Those would really assist with the efficiencies and just how the operations of the police department, when people are asking for footage and things like that, it would help with searching. Plus, these are older items that also need to be replaced. Trying to expand the fire department intern program to WCTC. Currently, we work with MATC for that. I believe we have 9 interns. I'm not sure if they're all the positions are filled, but there was 9 allocated positions. Looking at creating a preventative maintenance program for city parks and open spaces. That would go in conjunctions with that park commission. Develop the street lighting conversion plan. You're all familiar with the challenges we have for that. That's something we need to do. And then there's a program, Memory Cafe program for seniors. That is going to be, I think it's going to be either in the senior center or the library. I can't remember for sure right now. Anyone have any questions on this slide? Number 3, citizen engagement. This fall we implemented our first West Allis Cares program, which was longer onboarding program for our employees, and we're going to build off of that. We're going to build the Citizen 101 program. The police department has a significant program that they have people come in. We want to do that on a citywide basis. So we'll be working to do that in 2020. And then working with IT and the other departments to make more of the information on the property files available to citizens. There's a lot of staff time that's spent assisting citizens, and as you are probably familiar, some people don't necessarily want to come in, so to provide that online ability for them is something they've been looking for. Then looking at online payments. Right now, how many different payment?
11.
We have 11 different payment vendors. We need to consolidate.
Different vendors?
As far as merchant services go, yeah, we're collecting it through, and it's like Antaeus, Paymentus, Official Payments. So we're trying to consolidate that into one back end.
So while it's convenient for the customers, it's not necessarily convenient for staff because there's probably 11 different processes for that. The mayor, he didn't mention. The next is to do customer and citizen feedback surveys. We did the citizen survey this year, but we want to do that anytime someone has an interaction with one of our employees or comes in, kind of like when you go to the doctor, you get the Press Ganey survey from them. We won't hire Press Ganey, but we'll do something similar to that and work on reviewing the processes and making improvements based on the feedback. The mayor did mention about expanding the role of the communication strategist to assist with the neighborhood association coordination with development and the police community service officers. I must have gotten interrupted on that line. Then also work on creating a residential guide in both English and Spanish. Obviously, the composition of our city is changing, and there's a greater need for that information to be provided in not just English. So, any questions on this? Okay, 2 more. So number 4, economic vitality and sustainability. The mayor mentioned about the structural deficit action team. This is something we really need to put together. So city employees, elected officials, or whomever, and then people from the community can take part in this and make some suggestions that the council can consider so we can sustain our city financially feasible way, which is not, we cannot keep going the way that we have been at this point. Looking at combining a bins and accessor position to work on residential revaluation and improve the accuracy of records. I believe there's a lot of inconsistencies between records and the building inspections and the assessor's office and things like that. It makes it confusing not only for citizens, but for our staff sometimes. So revaluation of residential properties if funded, I have that listed as if funded because that was not something that made it through the recommended budget. It had to be removed to meet our budget constraints. That is $170,000. We'll go through a little bit more of those things as we move forward. Working to reduce the cost for publications. We do a lot of required publications. They're required by the state of Wisconsin, and we can maybe tweak the way that we do it so we won't have to pay because the newspapers are sustaining their business somewhat through publications at this point. Tony's been working on reducing and consolidating the number of printers with departments. Hopefully that will come to fruition in 2020. We're also want to expand our risk management to organizational wide and then do more focus on emergency government. Implementing electronic parking citation system. Currently this is a very manual program that can take several days for things to get entered into the system, so people might want to pay something and they have to wait 3 or 4 days because staff hasn't had the ability or time to put it in there. Looking at using retired squad cars for all of the bins inspection staff and then other departments aside from that, and not just departments at City Hall.
How's that been working out with bins? Well, very well?
Yeah, there's a few, sometimes we have to get rid of a vehicle because it's just not cost effective, yeah. But work on collaborating between citizen-facing service delivery departments and then streamlining of departments' inspection processes. Any questions on this slide? The last strategic plan goal is the excellence in government. We're working to select a virtual City Hall software. As I mentioned before, some people don't necessarily want to come into City Hall to get our services. This will allow people to access that 365 days a year, 24/7. Continue working on technology training opportunities for staff. We've been investing a lot in technology and training staff for it. We need to continue that and in some cases ramp up how we're using the technology because it's not necessarily always in the most efficient way yet, and additional training will help with that. Implement Office 365. This is a Microsoft Office program. You can use it. It's in the cloud and things like that. So it creates a lot of efficiencies. There's, as part of that, there's something called Teams where you can collaborate a lot better with all of your different departments and people that are on the system. Work to get mobile technology for staff to increase efficiencies. Sometimes the staff that don't have any mobile technology will be writing things on paper out there and then they have to come back in and enter it. People are waiting for that. It's delaying things. Reduce time to fill for positions. Convert record and processes to an integrated HRIS system. In the performance system, we did have to remove the funding for the HRIS system, but
What's HRIS?
Human Resources Information System,
Thank
I'm
you.
guessing.
Okay. The HR part is human resources.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, so right now we have a process where if somebody's phone number changes or their address changes, they fill this form out and it goes around to a whole bunch of different people, and we have that for a lot of things. And if you have something where people can do that themselves online, it just would, it's much more efficient. So that's just a little part of it. But I'm hopeful that with the current systems that we have, we can come up with a way to do that without, hopefully without purchasing another system, but we will definitely try. Work on acquiring the electronic poll books. We have 4 elections next year, significant one, so having those will assist the staff in that. Increase staff involvement in the election process. As we move forward with electronic poll books and the technology related to elections, Some of our poll workers are challenged with using that technology, so if we can have our staff that are more familiar and if we can train them, that will help with the accuracy of the elections, not only, and also help with the cost for the elections, because we're already paying them to be at work. Work on implementing the boards and commissions modules for Legistar program. Right now, there's a very manual process for people to be appointed on the boards and commissions. This module improves that a lot. I think the next one is about changing the codification. So our municipal code look to move to another provider, which makes it a lot easier for us to update and track changes. And also we want to expand that to the policy and procedures. Our book, I think, Steve, what did you say, 880?
833 plus about 20
Okay.
something plus changes.
Yeah, so we have a significant policy and procedure manual that we work on updating, but using the software would help us streamline that process also. Plus then it would be out there in a similar thing for people to search. Standardized applications for permits, licenses, and forms, and then work, because we're halfway through this strategic plan and next year is a election year, we want to make sure that we're aligning the strategic plan with the activities that are desired by the citizens. We'll be utilizing the citizen survey results to help us with that also. Oh, any questions on this? Any?
Saving them for later.
Okay. As the mayor mentioned, some of the challenges, the biggest challenge we have and continue to have is our participation in this expenditure restraint program. It limits the amount of increase from year to year. We'll get a little bit more into that in some of the future slides. Recruiting and retention of high quality employees. Believe it or not, people want to be paid for their services. We're not just volunteering. So having competitive salaries and increases helps with that. We did the facility study, so there's a significant amount of money that was identified to be allocated for repairing or maintenance of our different facilities. And then you're familiar with the road, sewers, and the streetlight challenges. Also, there's taxpayer financial limitations, and then levy limits. So just a little bit review on the expenditure restraint program. I think you're all familiar with it. Our current estimate of our limit for this year is 1.4 million. And then if we remain within the limit, it's somewhere around 1.5, 1.6. I think it varies, but that's less than 3% of our annual budget. So if you're compensating people and things are going up 3%, those numbers don't necessarily work out in the end. So in 2019, our adopted general fund budget was $61 million. Our current estimated ERP is 1.4 million. So that means for 2020, we should not have a budget more than $62 million. So the next area, you'll see the budget request were in excess of $65 million. So that's significantly above the 62. So the difference was 4.5 million. You take the expenditure restraint amount off of that, and our gap is about 3.1 million. That's what we started with. So we worked a lot with departments to analyze what we could do in this short term to fill that budget gap. And why did we have such a big gap in 2020? Really has to do with the salary increases for employees represented and non-represented. Plus, we didn't have any big ticket items this year to reduce costs. In the past, we had We moved the retiree to Medicare Advantage program. We did adjustments to our pharmacy benefit manager, health insurance change. Then there were also gradual increases to employee contributions for pension and healthcare premium shares. So we didn't, I described this, we didn't have a rabbit in our hat this year. And someone told me the rabbit was dead.
Eh,
Well, I think we were warned last year that we had a lot of one-time bonuses, so to speak, in the budget process.
So as I mentioned, the gap was closed through collaboration and cooperation of the departments. So we didn't have to recommend eliminating any filled positions. So I just want to thank the departments and the department heads for their cooperation on that. There wasn't pointing fingers or, look at somebody else. Everyone understood the enormity of the situation. So then just another statement about how we need to do something going forward, because we cannot keep going the way that we are. This has the expenditures by each of the departments. I'm sure it's really hard to read on your slides. Once we get the budget books, you'll be able to see them. But the overall expenditures are up 2.29%, which is the 1.4 million that we're able to go up with the Expenditure Restraint program.
So with that, we are within expenditure restraint.
Yes. So we have 751.95 total positions. 574 of them are benefited. We pay about 520 out of the general fund, and 54 are by other fund sources. In the recommended budget, there's some not funding of positions. The appraiser in the assessor's office start filling that position till May 1st, taking out intern in admin department, not having the grant writer, accountant in finance, delaying 2 vacancies in the police department, hiring 6 CSOs instead of 8, keeping open 3 positions in the fire department, reducing the funding for intern in development, and then no funding for 3 truck driver positions in the public works department. Oh, and 1 inventory. Thank you. So that is a little bit about the positions. And then here's the personnel allocation by function. As you're all aware, the majority of the personnel work in a public safety department. Here's a history of the equalized value, assessed value, the local tax rate. Now this is a very preliminary estimate, so it's 0.03 or 3 pennies is estimated as going up this year. We're still not sure of the overall tax rate. The other funding entities have to settle on theirs, and as you know, the revenues must meet the expenditures because we have to have a balanced budget. Here's a fact sheet that summarizes about the expenditures and the increases in the different categories of government, the levies, possible changes for $150,000 home, or the taxes, not the changes, but you can see that's a minimal increase, 1728 to 1733, or 1729 to 1734. And then, next steps is to work with the Capital Improvement Committee to finalize the capital program, obtain the remaining information from the state, calculate the proposed tax rate. Like I said before, that was an estimate that you received on the last slides. provide additional information to council members as needed. Look at possibly having Administration and Finance Committee meeting on November 5th at 6 p.m., which is before the Common Council meeting. The public hearing for the budget is on November 12th, and the council considers the recommended budget on November 19th. With that, if there's any questions or additional information you require, try to answer those.
Rebecca,
Yes.
you mentioned possibly not doing the residential reval this year. When was the last time we did that?
Never. Like
Not
30
lately.
30 years?
A
Well,
full residential reevaluation.
per the manual, for the definition in the manual, 1978.
So we're still working on the carryover, so there might be some funding available there, but some of that should also go for equipment and
Oh, there's lots of
contingencies.
demands for
Yes.
carryovers, I
Mhm.
get that. I just think
Yes.
that reval's gonna be,
Yes.
should be.
Mm-hmm. That would be one of the first things I would recommend putting back. In addition, there's $50,000 for replacement of PCs that needs to be put in. I think there might, I'm not sure, I had to talk to Peggy about this, but I think there are provisionals in the fire department. I'm not sure, did those get, I have to ask about some funding in there, but those would be the
So you
two
have the-
things,
Yeah, but the
Yeah.
PCs are, you said was 50K,
right?
but the reval, and that would be.
170.
That'd be contracted, or?
Correct. And that's an estimate, so we don't really have a hard number on that, but that's an estimate, so.
Anything else? Alderman May?
Sure. So do we have a employee list of number of positions by department
Yes, it will be.
last year versus this year?
Mhm.
Okay.
You're gonna get that any minute
I
in
can't
your
wait.
budget. It's just the suspense, we're doing that every year.
Yes, right?
Not
It
really.
could be- Yeah,
So there are a couple
Yes.
things I noted, and I brought it up with Rebecca previously, is that we show, for example, a grant writer in your office, but we're saying it's not funded. And so there's places in the budget where I feel like there's a little bit of confusion. So for example, these goals, there were several things where we said it was a goal for the year, but we're not gonna fund it. And is there any way we can get a list of those things that are shown as goals or positions that we're showing, and maybe just have them as a separate list so we understand what has been taken out of that? That would be very helpful. I have a question for the police chief, actually, regarding the cart position. What does that position do for their time during a week?
So Cart, during his 40 hours a week, rides with a clinician from Milwaukee County Behavioral Health. And the two of them actively respond to ongoing situations. And if there isn't an ongoing situation to respond to, they're managing a caseload of people in the city that have, long-going mental health issues. So the goal is to drive down the number of times that the people get taken to the mental health hospital, and it's achieving that goal. I believe in 2018, it was something like 179 times they responded. It did not take the person with them, where had they not been working and had you not had a clinician with you, police officers very likely would take the person to mental health.
Okay.
So,
Okay, and then it was mentioned that perhaps there were two positions from the police department that we wouldn't be able to fund during the presentation.
Delaying
Delaying them?
funding until August 1st.
What positions are those
police officer.
officers?
Yep, we will put them into the academy. The norm now is that we have to put people through the academy. So we would not look to hire in January. We would start a process maybe around March with a goal of getting people in the academy in August.
So it'd be short two officers that are there working today currently?
No, there are 3 vacancies right now.
Mhm.
People have retired and or left for other reasons.
Okay. Until August, you said?
Mhm.
Okay. Okay.
And
Thank
then
you.
Chief, don't
Oh,
go
yeah.
away,
I
just
thought
since
I
we
was
had
off
you
the
here.
hook.
And then just to follow up on the community service officer positions, instead of having 8 community service officers, the proposed budget has 6. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so we have struggled getting to the 8. We were looking to hire some people as recently as a few weeks ago, and I think because of their youth, we lose more of them in the background process than we would a potential police officer. So we have gotten up to 4, and if we keep at it, we will get up to 8, but we'll be fine at 6. 6 is still higher than the 4 that we have been at.
What position was that for again?
Community service officer?
The
CSO?
civilian,
Mhm.
hopeful future police officer in our mind.
Sure. And then the SRO at Lane, my understanding is we have one at Franklin Wright, each of the high schools. I'm guessing the middle school is covered by West Milwaukee if they have one.
Yeah, so
Lane is missing one.
Yeah, Lane's the only middle school, at least on the West Allis side of the border, that does not have an SRO. And the school district would like to see it, but the reality is, for me, if we put an SRO in the school, we have one less SRO on the streets, or cop on the streets. So we are hopeful that the school district, for the same money that they're currently paying, they give us overtime to put police officers at Lane on an overtime basis. And we believe for the same money, we could get a limited term employee, perhaps about 30 hours a week, off during the summer, off during school vacations. So they would get consistency in that it was the same person, but it would be essentially a part-time police officer.
A question I had from a constituent is what do they do? They ever arrest anybody? Do they ever?
Yep.
Yeah.
they-
I can tell you what they do, Alderman, man.
Yeah, let's hear it. Well, what did you do?
You know you're not. I'm sorry, go ahead, Chief.
So they do a variety of things, and yes, citations and arrest are a part of it. Working with the kids on a daily basis, and ideally preventing arrest would be another part of it. We don't see so much of it in the middle schools, but in the high school, truancy enforcement is a big part of what they do. So the police officers in the schools are very, very busy.
Okay.
So would this be like a retired officer that would be the optimal type person? or
We
something
believe
different?
it could be either a retired officer, or it could be an officer in their 20s, 30s, or 40s that perhaps has a spouse that's doing very well. They still want to be a police officer, but don't necessarily need to work full-time, and would love to be off in the summer with their kids if they've got school-age children. So we think we'll get a good mixture of people that would apply for that.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
All right, anything else?
Mr.
Alderman?
Chair,
Yes.
is there a tourism budget listed out in here in detail
Yes.
to see where all the money went, everything for the last year and where it's going in the future year?
Mm-hmm.
You had mentioned publication costs and things like that. Does that have anything to do with the city newsletter, or how?
No, that's separate.
Okay.
I'm talking about like required publications in the newspaper, like when we have new ordinances or things like that, or
Mhm.
the budget, we have to publish, that's the publication.
So our glossy magazine-like things, how expensive are those, and what budget are those paid out of?
They are coming out of the communications budget, which is currently being funded by revenues from cable.
Oh.
But as you can imagine, those revenues are getting less and less each year. In 2020, it's our recommendation to go from 4 of those publications to 3. And I believe, John, how much is?
I think we're gonna go to a triennial publication.
Mm-hmm.
So, starting with this issue, the winter and spring issue will be combined, and there'll be a summer issue and then a fall issue. We would save about $7,000 on printing and $7,000 on postage.
Okay.
We do a lot of more of notification through social media and a monthly electronic newsletter and things like that. So people are getting more regular information on a timely basis if they're subscribed or online.
Okay, and then the business liaison position, I'm sorry, thank you, Jen. The business liaison position, would this be a full-time position?
I believe that is the goal of that position, thinking perhaps it might be someone has either architect experience or building inspection, so they can kind of speak the language of our.
Of the applicants.
Of the applicants as well as our professionals here and be the conduit between those, but that is not in the, recommended budget. It's just the thought of it is in the letter.
And one thing I've seen in other communities is they have a pre-made document with, the department's name on it, with an area for people to write comments, and when a plan comes in, that document gets passed to all the departments at the same time, using a cloud type thing, where on the same day and the same time, everyone could be looking at it, at the plans, writing down their comments, what they're concerned about. The team meets, and they get back to the developer with one cohesive document. Is that one of the things, I heard the development assistant team, the streamlining the process, and the interfacing, and the business liaison. Is that something that's been considered?
I think that's that's the goal of all of those things. I don't know if you have an example of a good example from a community.
City of Waukesha uses one. I know the Department of
just-
Transportation uses it, but that's a transportation focus, I guess, but,
Just trying to take out some of the hoops and the challenges that people have where they might not have been told some information at the beginning, and it's really, it stops their whole project when they find that out. So if we can provide that at the beginning in a more formal document written down, because when people, when you're talking to people, they only remember maybe
The
a
good
portion
news.
of it, yes.
Or the bad news.
What they want to
Want to
remember,
hear.
yes. So,
it also gets the department's understanding what the other ones need, and
mhm.
before that document goes out, they're communicating. So you're getting some of the effect of, I think, what you're going for with the assistant team and the business liaison. Citizen surveys, do you know when we're gonna get those?
I believe they're still putting some in, so not everyone did them electronically, so a lot of people have been working together to put that information in, and then once it's in, we'll have to compile the information to share it with you. So it might be a little time,
Okay.
like 6 to 8 weeks, or I don't know.
We have 100 more to go,
Oh,
paper ones then.
that's nice.
So there was about 1,400 done online and another 1,265 mailed back. So it takes about a half hour to enter one manually.
Okay.
And they're able to
It's-
get
it's
them into
big.
the envelope.
Right.
Varying
Yes. Duct
Various
tape.
family members complain,
Oh.
and I showed them how to do it.
Well, they didn't, I had no less than 10 calls about the envelopes, so.
I just want to comment, I really like this idea of the structural deficit action team. It'd be nice if there were an older person or two on there as well.
I think his name starts with May.
The last name starts with May. I'm sure he would love to be on that committee. But I think it would make sense to have a couple of people on there from the council too, just to give the gut check of,
Yeah.
That's all I have for now. I think once we have the paper copies, I tried reviewing it electronically, but it's much harder to keep notes the way that we get it electronically, so. Yeah.
Anything else?
I would piggyback on, if I could, Mr. Chair,
Hmm?
on what Alderman May said about that business liaison. I know of 2 cases in my district where time could have been saved along the way, and maybe a decision for one of the properties could have come to, sooner, And I think that speaks to that a lot of our new businesses are small business owners, entrepreneurs. They have a great idea for a vision for a business. The big chains, they have
Oh, yeah.
a professional team of people who come into town with a dog and pony show, and they know how to work the hoops. But if we want to encourage small independent businesses to open our city, we need to make it easier for them.
Where would that position be located?
In the hallway between development and bid.
Right.
What department would that?
Well, ultimately, that would be up to the council, but I believe the mayor had proposed putting it in his office. Just because of the, what word can I say? when someone works for the mayor, they might be taken a little bit more seriously than from one department to another. That, not that people don't take each other seriously, but
Sure.
it's
No, no,
the,
no.
If it's one, if it's, if
The
it's
respect
if
of the
it's in
office.
one of the departments, he might have more pull there and less in another department. I think we get that.
Everyone has their own turf, right?
right.
It's just natural. right?
Or she.
Mhm.
All right. Anything else? Anything else to properly come before the committee?
Check on the books.
Other than the printed copies?
Yeah, we'll wait for that.
So November 5th at 6 o'clock. And in between then, feel free to contact me or Peggy if you have questions, or the departments. Do you need to get the books on?
Yeah, we can
Video.
adjourn. Right,
Okay.
right. There's,
Move your adjourn.
Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We're adjourned. Thanks, everybody.